The mayor of Chicago thinks that if only Trump would fund more ATF agents in Chicago, then the gun violence problem would be dealt with. This is a completely absurd proposition, but it plays to the politics that she likes to talk about. Guns bad, Second Amendment bad, Trump doing anything to help, of course, bad. This is what we know that she's going to say. She might as well have said the NRA is causing all the violence in Chicago. This is absurd. There's no problem with bad people, criminals who want to harm innocents, getting guns in Chicago. It's obviously not complicated or hard to do. And saying that there's not enough prosecutors for gun cases, I mean, the laws in Chicago are like the laws in New York. They're very strict on having an illegal firearm. But guess what? The people that are willing to shoot somebody don't care about the enhancement of possession of an illegal firearm. They're going to carry it anyway. And as we know, all they have to do is get it on the illegal market, which is not difficult. They just find somebody that has a hookup, and you can buy guns from out of state. That happens all the time. One of the ways the criminals get guns in New York City, Pennsylvania has much more lax gun laws than New York does. So you get somebody from Pennsylvania who is able to go in and buy guns and then just drives up to New York City and sells them on the street. I knew guys, the NYPD, what they dealt with was one of their missions was to arrest those illegal gun sales. But it doesn't stop the problem. No, what's needed in Chicago is far more united and aggressive policing in areas where they know they have particularly high crime. And there needs to be a political will to send in the cops to go after the bad guys. That's it. Everything else is noise. And Chicago's been dealing with this for a long time. But yeah, that's right. Notice how she doesn't want federal agents on the streets trying to help out with the situation. Doesn't want that. Why? I thought that the Democrats loved federal agents, right? The FBI, beyond reproach. Oh, the FBI was beyond reproach only insofar as it was useful to pretend that James Comey, the FBI director, wasn't a slimy, dirtbag Democrat deep stater. Now that was an alliteration. But really, that's the only reason they were pretending they loved the FBI so much. It was useful for their anti-Trumpism. Now we look at what they're saying about these federal agents who are, if they're engaged in illegal activity, as Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago is saying here, why doesn't she tell her cops to make an arrest? Go ahead. See how that turns out for you. Try to arrest the federal agent engaged in federal law enforcement business because you want to tell your constituents that they can get away with breaking the law. Because it's valuable to the Democrat Party right now. We need to say what this is. I mean, the Democrats are, right now, at this point in time, not just going soft on crime. Some crimes they are in favor of. They are pro-crime under certain circumstances. Destroying public property, destroying statues, breaking windows, looting stores. They don't want anyone to be held accountable for that. Maybe they'll have to shut it down after it's gone on long enough. They'll send in cops, say, hey, everybody, disperse. But they don't want people getting tracked down, going to prison over this. That's their base. Those are their voters. They can't have that. No, so instead they make sure that the federal government, which, as we know, historically, the federal government has served the purpose of enforcing laws where states decide that they will not. They will not. And whether we're talking about sanctuary cities or now dealing with these mobs, Democrats are once again the party of lawlessness. Or you can believe sitting United States member of Congress, Maxine Waters, who has quite a theory as to what's going on with these federal government law enforcement officers. Play clip 8.
And when he tells you he cannot commit to stepping down, believe him. Believe him, because I tell you something is going on in this country. When I take a look at what is going on in Oregon and who are these federal agents unidentified in unmarked cars that are raining down on the protesters. Who are these people? Are they organized by and with the President of the United States? Are there more of them? Or are they in practice for what they're going to do when they resist the fact that this president perhaps is not going to be reelected? I think Americans should be worried, but I've thought all along that Americans should be concerned. This is the most flawed character that I've ever encountered in my life. He's dangerous, and I believe him when he says that he cannot tell us whether or not he's going to accept, if he is not elected.
Nothing that Congresswoman Waters says is considered too crazy for the Democrats. I don't know how else to put it. These are federal law enforcement officers, duly sworn and under the orders of the federal government, who are stopping criminal activity, including very clear federal jurisdiction issues like preventing a mob from burning down a federal courthouse. The federal government gets to do that. The federal government does get to step in. For those who may not know this, when the feds want to, they can get involved in a whole lot of things. Democrats abuse this all the time. Republicans, because we like to try to fight fair on all this stuff, go, well, that's not really the intent of, that's an abuse or whatever. The Controlled Substances Act, for example, you don't think of having a little bit of an illegal drug as a federal issue. Yeah, it is actually. Now, I'm not agreeing necessarily that that's the way it should be. I'm just telling you it is. Somebody goes out and sells a bunch of prescription painkillers on the street. Your local law enforcement may arrest you for that and prosecute you, but you are absolutely in violation of federal law and could be federally prosecuted. In fact, friends of mine from the NYPD would talk about how sometimes to help handle the caseload on drug cases, on larger drug cases, the local prosecutor would allow federal prosecutors to come in and just take a number of the cases off their hands. They called it Federal Day. You really didn't want Federal Day if you were the person who was the suspect. If you had been arrested for this. So now we look at what's going on with these different cities and the lawlessness. There are a ton of ways to justify the deployment of federal law enforcement resources, just like when they were trying to destroy in Lafayette Square, destroy a federal statue. That's the federal government has the ability to enforce the law and protect its property. Right? If someone tries to go at the White House and starts throwing a Molotov cocktail at it, they don't have to wait for D.C. Metro Police to show up. The federal government, in this case, the Secret Service, will stop that. So Democrats can whine and complain about this all day. If they really think there's a secret kidnapping squad that's taking people off the streets and not, okay, tell your law enforcement officers to try to effect an arrest and see how that goes for them. Now, I don't want federal law enforcement officers. I don't want law enforcement officers to get caught in the middle of this insanity. I think the cops would say, "No, I'm not going to try to arrest the DHS officer right now." I think that's going to be counterproductive. And on what charge? You want to get into it with the federal government over this? I know what it's like. I worked at the CIA. I've worked at the NYPD. You really don't want to be on the side of the equation where your local resources are going up against the federal resources. Not a fight you're going to win. So, and this is also, we've known about this on the right for a long time because of the concerns of what if they tried to come after all your guns and use federal law enforcement agents to do this? Where do sheriffs fall on that issue and how would that happen? But it would not go well if they mobilize the ATF, DHS, and the various federal law enforcement entities out there in order to seize weapons. That would be a huge problem for the country. But I want to get back into this issue of dealing with the violence in cities. Another very important, other than just the lunacy of Congressman Waters saying that maybe these officers who have been arresting looters, rioters, people attacking. There's video of it. You see it. People attacking cops. Maybe they're like the Praetorian Guard of Trump, and they won't allow him to leave office. This is just crazy talk. Look, I'm going to say it. If Trump loses the election, I'm sure he'll be disappointed, and it'll be a bit of an ego blow for the guy. But, he gets to go back to being a super famous billionaire who does whatever he wants, and he'll be okay. He's not looking to overthrow the United States government and be dictator for life. I know this is hard for Democrats to hear because they're so sure of it, but he's really not going to do that. And a well-adjusted, intelligent person wouldn't think that he would do that. And that then brings me back to Maxine Waters. Notice that she has a problem with the deployment of federal law enforcement resources and has nothing negative to say. You won't hear Democrats be like, look, what's going on in Portland is a disgrace. About the protesters, the rioters, the Antifa thugs. They don't spend their airtime talking about this. They don't say what's happening in Portland and in Seattle is a disgrace to the Democrat Party. They don't stand for this. No. No. Not at all. Not at all. So remember that. Remember that they are making decisions with that and showing you what they really believe and who they really support all the time.
And you know what? If Biden got in, that would be true for the country. The whole country would go to hell. And we're not going to let it go to hell.
I certainly hope not. The president's willing to take action here. And that's one of the reasons the left hates him so much. He's not going to sit back and allow this to continue. On the other side of this, you have to remember that this is unfortunately all within the Democrat playbook. All the mayhem, all the anarchy, the destruction. They think that they politically benefit from this. Senator Cruz is out there just saying, remember this, folks, that the angry leftists who came out and delivered the House of Representatives, the Democrats, the last time around, there's going to be a lot of that this time. Play 18.
Let me tell you right now, every one of those crazed, angry leftists who showed up in 2018, they're showing up in 2020, and they're even angrier. They hate President Trump, and far too many of them hate America. The left, it's not going to stop at anything to come after Texas and come after this country. And we've got 4 months to stop a blue wave from destroying the great state of Texas.
Texas is in Democrat crosshairs, friends. Some of the polling out of Texas has been far more concerning than anybody would have thought at this point. You're gonna have to keep saying. I'm gonna have to keep saying this. It's early. We don't know exactly where this is all going, but we do need to understand that it's go time right now. I've been thinking more and more about it. I got friends asking me, Buck, do you think Trump can win? From what I understand, things are looking better in Florida now, which is key. Without Florida, it's all over. Another reason why producer Mark and I might have to move to Florida. But without Florida, it's all over. Beyond that, I'm starting to see some movement in the right direction. And I think Trump is getting back into his old groove a bit. I think it's happening. I also think that he's going to have to get a lot of help from people out there making the case along with him about what we really face if, in fact, the Biden presidency were to become a thing. As troubling as that is, the Biden presidency could very well become a thing. And that's why the arguments we're having about what's going on with law enforcement and also with COVID are so very, very important. You have these two issues are going to determine, because the economy right now isn't even really isn't normal. It's being the economy is being held hostage really by COVID-19 and by the Democrat lockdown policies that are still continuing on around it. I liked what Kayleigh, the White House press secretary, had to say about de Blasio, just because he's ruining New York City. She threw a little shade his way. Play that clip.
together to take control of the streets of New York City, where in some places we've seen 600% surge in violence over last year. So he thinks they should work together. It's ultimately the power of the mayor to enforce, and the governor to enforce the police power of their states. That power rests with them, but they can partner with the federal government in the event they're unable to control the violence in their cities. And that's certainly what we've seen from Mayor de Blasio, who seems to have not a hard time criticizing police officers, but an awfully hard time controlling the streets of New York City.
Yep. She is telling it like it is. And it's important for people to hear how this is really all shaking out and what's really happening. Because these are Democrat policies that are having consequences that are resulting in loss of life. People are dying because Democrats believe and insist on stupid things. And that's the case here in New York and a lot of places across the country. You know, de Blasio, one of the very specific bits of advice he had given is that he didn't want, there have been these instances of people engaging in, I don't know what, like fireworks fights, shooting fireworks at each other, and large numbers of fireworks these are in primarily Black and Latino neighborhoods of New York. And there's all this shooting of fireworks at each other, and the cops aren't doing anything about it. And the de Blasio response to this had been, hey, you know, we don't want cops involved, even though this is dangerous. Even though you get hit with a firework, you know, you could put out an eye, you could get burned really badly, you could die. No, we don't want cops getting involved in this. Let's just let people have their own conversations about this and ask their neighbors if they'll stop doing this. So a woman was killed in Brooklyn just a couple of days ago. A woman was killed, Shatavia Walls. She was murdered because she took the advice of Democrat borough president Eric Adams, actually. So he's somebody who works for the city council, or the borough president's like the city council. Eric Adams' advice, he's a Democrat, that New Yorkers have disputes settled neighbor to neighbor instead of calling 911 when there's all these illegal fireworks. Shatavia Walls was blasted 8 times, according to the New York Post, in an East New York housing complex. And she was asking the people firing these, to take their fireworks away from a group of kids playing. And they shot her to death. So she said, hey, can you stop firing the fireworks that the cops are not going to do anything about, because de Blasio doesn't want them to. And the borough president says, just talk to your neighbors about this. She talked to her neighbors. She's dead now. She got killed for listening to the advice of elected Democrats who told the cops to stand down. This is what is happening because of Democrat insanity. People are dying. You need to remember that. I can't believe we're being evicted from our home that we didn't even sell. That's what Deborah said when she learned she was the victim of home title fraud, which is a crime that can actually cost you your home. Title fraud is not covered by insurance or identity theft services. The only trusted folks to protect you are at Home Title Lock. Your home's legal title's online where cyber thieves find it and forge your signature stating that you sold your home to them. In Deborah's case, she didn't even know she was a victim until the eviction notice arrived. Home Title Lock puts a virtual barrier around your home's title. If there's any tampering detected, they will instantly mobilize to stop it. So go to HomeTitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're a victim and don't know it. Use code BUCK for 30 free days of protection. That's code BUCK at HomeTitleLock.com. That's HomeTitleLock.com, code BUCK.
But this is a worldwide problem. And we're helping the world with ventilators. We're helping a lot of countries. They don't have ventilators, and we're sending thousands of ventilators to different countries. But I do want people to understand this is a worldwide problem caused by China, but it's a worldwide problem.
It is a global problem, and that often gets lost in the effort to make this all about how terrible Trump is. That countries, many countries all over the world have been suffering terribly from COVID-19. Brazil has been having an awful time dealing with this. And when you look at the per capita numbers, we're in a much better position than a lot of the large European countries that would be the closest points of comparison for us in terms of wealth and healthcare resources and so on and so forth. So that's going well. I was very interested in a study that was noted. Reuters, the big international news conglomerate, Reuters put out this study today, or was noting this study, I should say, that in South Korea. So look, South Korean epidemiologists. This is not like a country that we would ignore. South Korean epidemiologists, and Korea has done a very good job dealing with this disease, have, quote, found that people were more likely to contract the new coronavirus from members of their own households than from contacts outside the home. A study published in the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on July 16th. So this is a South Korean study published in the U.S. CDC journal on July 16th, looked in detail at 5,706 index patients who had tested positive for the coronavirus and more than 59,000 people who came into contact with them. So it's a big study, all right? And the findings showed, quote, just 2 out of 100 infected people had caught the virus from non-household contacts, while 1 in 10 had contracted the disease from their own families. By age group, the infection rate within the household was higher when the first confirmed cases were teenagers or people in their 60s and 70s. They said, quote, this is probably because these age groups are more likely to be in close contact with family members as a group is in more need of protection or support. This is from the Korean director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Children age 9 and under were least likely to be the index patient. So it's very unlikely you'll get this from kids. Children with COVID-19 were also more likely to be asymptomatic than adults, which made it harder to identify cases within that group. So kids basically, again, huge study. Kids don't get this and don't give this to other people. And if they do get it, it's so minor that they don't even know they've got it. 12 and under, you got basically no worries about COVID-19. More so than you would have any worries about any other kind of disease you can get out there that's easily communicable and constantly spreading. So what does this tell us about the fight to reopen schools? Well, as we know, that's all political. They got to keep the schools shut down. If they don't keep the schools shut down, there's the possibility of a recovery, and not just an economic recovery, the recovery of our day-to-day lives, the recovery of letting us go back to normal life. The Democrats, the left, can't have that. So you got to keep the schools shut down. But this study, I think what's even more interesting to me is just that people are so much more likely to get this disease at home. That answers a very important question. Why is it that even when we had the most draconian lockdown, right, the biggest lockdown you could think of in New York, at least in this country, everything shut down, no one leave your house unless you absolutely have to. While that's all happening, there is still a lot of spread of the virus. Well, as we know, you couldn't have everyone stay. You have essential workers. Oh, that's right, essential workers. Hold on a second. So people have to go and can go work in grocery stores and drugstores so that society doesn't basically starve and collapse. But teachers don't have to show up and teach? Wow. Well, I just got to say, thank you, truckers, grocery store workers, and first responders, as well as other essential personnel who kept doing their job. We are being told very clearly by the teachers' unions, teachers are non-essential. Non-essential personnel, at least that's their opinion, whether you agree with it or not. I think that's certainly it's worth noting in all this. But anyway, I want to go back to the household transmission issue. because we have been told all along that if we only wear masks and do the distancing, everything's going to be fine. Well, no, the most likely place you're going to get this is from another member of your own household. And all it takes is one person in the household who has to go out to get food or to get medical attention to be exposed to this, and then they bring it home. That's where a lot of the transmission is happening. And then everyone in the family gets it. So there is no, even under a lockdown scenario, where you have people who are, a lot of limitation of which family members are being exposed to the outside world. All you need is one person with outside world exposure to spend time among those back at home. And this is how you're getting a lot of people sick with this. That's what the South Korean study says, which is not surprising at all to me, but I do think it's worth noting. So while they're saying, okay, just go out for the essentials, lock down and wear a mask. Well, you'll still be possibly getting infected as the one person who's going out there for the lockdown, during the lockdown, and then everyone in your family is highly susceptible to getting it as well. And that's how a lot of the transmission is actually occurring. So unless you're going to tell everybody 2 weeks, you cannot leave, unless we had a true lockdown for 2 weeks, you're still going to have continued transmission of the disease. I did see that Trump is wearing a mask. He is now, and he said that it's patriotic to wear a mask. And the Surgeon General, I believe, Jerome Adams, yes, spoke on this. Play clip 6.
Well, I'm a physician, not a political pundit, and it doesn't do me any good to get back and forth about the president. What I can tell you is I'm very pleased that he actually is now wearing a face covering. Medically, he's tested more than anyone. So from a medical standpoint, I understand why he chooses not to. But I'm glad that he has said that this is a patriotic thing to do, to support your freedom. It's something I've been saying for 4 months now.
Right. Patriotic thing to do, support your freedom. I just don't look, if people want a mask, that's fine. But the pressure to mask, I think, has gotten completely absurd. And I think that the president here is, in a sense, caving to pressure. But, maybe he knows better than me. He's president and I'm not. So I'm not going to come down too hard on him for this one. I just know that every time he does what his political opponents and enemies want him to do, there is a cost, there are consequences, and they're not good. That I do know for sure. To me, the mask wearing, I saw somebody today on Fox News, a doctor, saying, we now have so many studies and have shown us so much about how effective masks are. All I see are people saying, I see experts who say, yeah, we think that they work and we think it's worth wearing now. That's what I don't see anyone saying we looked at a sample of 5,000 people and did actual rigorous testing with a control group, the gold standard of scientific experiment, and we find out that it's a marked and important limitation on the spread of this virus to be constantly wearing a cloth face covering that you can breathe out of and you breathe in from. That's really important. I have yet to see that. I might have missed that study, but I've seen plenty of studies that were published before this whole disaster that were saying, look, it doesn't really, with aerosolized virus, it doesn't really matter. And there are concerns that were raised in good faith by medical experts before the pandemic, because everyone also knows that if we find out that masks really do nothing, if that people are never going to trust the medical establishment in the same way ever again. Right. We all know that, too. So there's a real incentive here to be like, oh, no, this is a great thing. I'm just asking questions, but I wear a mask. Not all the time. I don't wear it outside because that's dumb. But I will wear one when I go to the store because that's what's required. And I don't want to make people around me nervous unnecessarily. So whenever I'm in a building where there's an elevator, I live in a tall tower in New York, and small apartment, tall tower. And if I see somebody in there and I don't have a mask on, I will wait for the next elevator. I try to always be polite about all these things. I don't want people feeling unduly anxious about any of this. But I also think that we need to understand what a mask mandate or even mask social pressure leads to and what that feels like. And it's oppressive and probably worthless for, well, let's just put it this way. 99% of the people wearing masks are doing so without being sick themselves and assuming that this is giving them some protection from the transmission of this virus. But as we know, it's most likely that they will get the virus in sustained close contact where they're very unlikely to continue wearing a mask. So they're protecting themselves from someone passing them on the street or walking next to them in the grocery store or perhaps sitting next to them on the bus. Those are not the high transmission risk scenarios. It's the person they sit down with, take off a mask, and talk to for 20 minutes up close, or the family members that they're, eating dinner with every night. That's where the real risk is. This is established. We know this. So I'm sorry. I'm still, I'm not anti-mask. I have some skepticism in me about how useful this is, not for healthcare professionals, not for people that are at high risk, of how useful this is for the general public. I mean, what I would really like to see is an area where we should take one place where we know that the virus has spread, one city, and do a really rigorous study to show that if there was, let's say, 90% plus mask compliance, then then the cases crater, just disappear. If that happened, I'd say, wow, okay, maybe why can't we do this? Why is there's really no effort to prove any of this. We're just told do it because we said so. There's a lot of because we said so going on in the COVID measures, anti-COVID measures world these days. A lot of that, which I find quite troubling.
I'm focused right now on November. We're going to win in November, and we all should be focused on this. Donald Trump demonstrates every single day, not just that he's incompetent, it's also that he is dangerous. And people are dying because of this pandemic because Donald Trump has not been able to show the appropriate leadership. Our economy is in worse trouble than it otherwise would have been because Donald Trump is leading us in the wrong direction. So for me, that's where this is.
So subtle from Elizabeth Warren here. Named, I believe, Pocahontas by President Trump, or does he call her Pocahontas? I'm not sure. That's the president's name for his former opponent and would-be Democrat presidential nominee. So she clearly does not like him, and he clearly does not like her. But she's not being subtle at all, is she? Because Trump. Wow, guys, where things are bad because of Donald Trump. We're just gonna win. And we're gonna come back, and we're gonna help Main Street, because my daddy always said Main Street is the real street where the dreams come true. And go to ElizabethWarren.com and make a donation today, because I'm only worth $12 million. Yeah. Elizabeth Warren, everybody. They wanted her to be president. Look, I'm amazed. Why'd they go with Biden over Warren? I really think that Biden is the beneficiary, still the single most potent brand affiliation as a Democrat today is with Obama, no question. And so just Biden being Obama's VP, that was really it. Everything else was kind of noise. And the black community, Democrat primary voters were very comfortable. They liked Biden, and that was really it, Wasn't going to be Buttigieg, for example, whose support among minorities, as we recall, was a 0. They couldn't even register it. It's like in the Nielsen ratings for a TV show, and the ratings are so bad that they don't even have ratings for it. That was Buttigieg with minority support among Democrats, and also Elizabeth Warren's support among minorities, if I recall, was quite weak. Biden's was very strong. That was the game changer. You also remember the Democrats had this whole about face where it was going to be Bernie, who was ready to go, baby. Bernie Sanders, President 2021. And that disappeared because they realized that having an open socialist, they can't give away the game so clearly. having an open socialist was too much of a risk to their party. And even Elizabeth Warren, as a former Harvard Law professor who just, wants to help the working man and woman. She cares so much about all that and the Wall Street fat cats and the lack of leadership from this president. I've got to say, so many of our politicians are so unimpressive. They're really just, it's amazing, isn't it? What do you think of? These are the people that run the most powerful, wealthiest country in the history of the world. A country that, if it really turned rogue and evil, could destroy the whole planet many times over. That has, wealth that would have been unthinkable for any entire world to hold 100 years ago. Now but we've got Elizabeth Warren calling the shots. Calling the shots. That's right. That's what we can expect the Democrat Party. I'm still wondering who Biden's VP is. Every day another story. I don't want to keep doing all the conjecture over who Biden's VP is going to be. Let's just find out. Let's find out. I do kind of hope that it's Stacey Abrams. It's not going to be Elizabeth Warren. It pretty much, for Democrat political reasons, has to be a woman of color. And I will refrain from all the jokes that people make about Elizabeth Warren being a fake woman of color. Because they've all been made. All those jokes have already been made. I mean, that's at this point now, it's amazing that Elizabeth Warren managed to keep it going even after her whole DNA test debacle. That CNN was like, breaking news, Elizabeth Warren is 0.1% Cherokee. But I hope it's Stacey Abrams as Biden's VP because I want them to have to defend that choice publicly. The woman who still claims she won an election in Georgia that she lost.